go time. This is the best team that they can put on the field this year.
Welcome to 49ers Forecast.
You guys are going to hear it. The latest from the locker room, the latest from the podium, the latest scuttle from the players.
On your proud home of 49ers football.
Touchdown!
KNBR, the sports leader. Your faithful fix with your host Larry Krueger begins now.
And welcome to 49er Forecast on a beautiful Saturday here in November. Larry Krueger with you on the Sports Leader. Hope everybody is enjoying their weekend time, the good family time. KNBR on the weekend, keeping it on. It's a great companion for you. We'll have a little college football later on today, I'm sure. Of course, Niner football tomorrow. With Adam Copeland and Tracy Sandler, Todd Husak, Tim Webb on the call. I will join the mix. I believe JD will, Matt Mayoko, and others as we come to you live tomorrow from Levi Stadium, a 1:25 kickoff, the rematch of 49ers-Rams, a game that we saw in Week 5 in L.A. as the 49ers rolled into Southern California with Mac Jones and beat the Rams. I think that was an amazing win for the Niners. They were 8.5-point dogs. Shanahan, who doesn't talk a lot of point spreads with the team, did express to the team that we're 8.5-point dogs to this team, and didn't like that. And there is a rivalry between Shanahan and McVay that is very real. By the way, they're replaying the Week 5 game right now on the NFL Network. They're re-showing it. And it was a game where the Niners led 7-0 out of the chute. It was 17-7 49ers at half. It was 20-14 49ers at the end of 3, and it was all locked up at 23-23 going to overtime. And that's when the Niners kicked the field goal, got the big fourth down stop to end it. And Sean McVay blamed himself. He said, hey, it wasn't my players, it was me. I blew it. I blew that game. And what he meant was he blew the call at the end. You know, he opted to run 192-pound Kyron Williams at the teeth of the 49ers run defense right into the welcoming arms of Mikael Williams and Alfred Collins, who are very good against the run, even though they're rookies, and they stuffed it. They absolutely stuffed it. And Chase Lucas jumped in there. And threw his head in there, and the DBs, everybody came to the rescue, and it was a big stop right there on fourth down. And it was a surprise. I mean, this is why I think tomorrow's game is so interesting, is that anytime Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay get together, anytime the Niners and Rams get together, the old cliche is true. Throw out the standings, throw out the records. It's kind of like what we saw Thursday night from the Raiders and the Broncos. Are the Raiders as good as the Broncos? No. The Broncos are way better than the Raiders, but they're division opponents. The Broncos know the Raiders know the Broncos, and some of their head-to-head matchups make no sense. Why? Because that knowledge of your opponent just makes it harder to come away with the big plays. It's harder to fool them. You know, they have a really good working knowledge of your scheme, and they've got a really good working knowledge of your tendencies. So they kind of know what you want to do, and they don't let you do it. So a lot of these, you know, you see a spread that doesn't make sense with Raiders Broncos, you know, probably stay away like I did the other night. Just don't bet it one way or another. Just stay away from that game, because that means, you know, something's going on. And sure enough, you know, Broncos got the win, but the Raiders got the cover, and it was a very close, hard-fought, low-scoring game. And I kind of see the same thing here. Now, I don't know about the super low-scoring part, because the Rams have a pretty good offense, and I think the 49er offense is starting to peak a little bit, especially after last week in New York or New Jersey. I mean, the Niners offense starting to look a little better. They've run the ball more effectively. But I think it's probably going to be a very close game. I saw the stat 7 or 8 of the matchups between Shanahan and McVay since they've been both took over in this 2017 season have been by like 3 points or less, the final score. So, I mean, whether one team's favored over the other, in this case, the Rams are 4.5-point favorites. You can almost guarantee that it is going to be physical. It is going to be a fist fight, and it's going to be tight. I mean, it may, who knows? Maybe the Rams blow their doors off and hang half 100 on the 49ers beat up defense, and the Niners are struggling to do anything. You never know. That could happen, but I think it's going to be a close game. 49ers, I asked Kubiak yesterday about this. I said, hey, in that first game, it was really kind of a head knocker. I mean, the Niners ran the ball and they just didn't run it effectively, but they stayed with the run. And that really was the difference. I mean, the Rams ran really effectively, but didn't stay with the run. And the Niners ran poorly, but stayed with the run. And at the end of the day, they pretty much got the same results. Now, the Niners had 74 yards rushing in the first matchup. The Rams had 78 yards rushing. But the Rams ran for 5 yards a carry. It was 16 carries for 78 yards, 4.9 a carry. The Niners ran 33 times for 74 yards, 2.2 yards a carry, not efficient at all. CMC himself ran for 57 of the hardest yards you're ever going to see, 22 carries for 57 yards, 2.6 a carry for CMC, 2.4 a carry for Brian Robinson. So the Niners just couldn't run it effectively, but they stayed with it. They stayed with it, and they maintained a little bit more offensive balance than the Rams did. The Rams at the end of the game had 47 passes, 16 runs, kind of gave up on the run game, and then oddly went to their run game in the crucial moment where the Niners, 49 passes of Mac Jones, 33 runs, a little bit better balance. And the 49ers got that 14-point lead. And found a way to hold on and win 26-23 to go to 4-1 and to send the Rams to 3-2 and their first loss at home all year. It was a great win for the 49ers. Now you've got the rematch, and you got to think the Rams are going to come out firing. You got to think McVay is going to have a fantastic game plan. Can the 49ers stop Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford? Stafford threw for 389 and 3 touchdowns last time. No picks. They only sacked him once. Jones last time was only sacked once, but I thought that was a miracle because he was hit 10 times on the day, but only sacked once. Also in that first matchup, Kendrick Bourne had the game of his life. Jones threw him 11 passes, and he caught 10 of them for 142 yards. And he had a huge day. I mean, biggest day of his career. Also, it was a big day for Marquise Siegel that day. He had 13 tackles, 7 solo. Fred Warner, who's not going to be in this game for the Niners tomorrow, obviously was huge in the first one. He had 12 tackles in the game and really was everywhere, shutting down Kyren Williams. So it'll be interesting to see what the Rams do. Do the Rams come out and say, you know what, we're going to try to run it down the 49ers' throat? And kind of mano a mano. I mean, the Niners really can't stand up to any team that controls the tempo and any team that controls the time of possession. The Niners need to control the time of possession. In fact, Kubiak spoke to that yesterday. He's like, hey, yeah, we need to run the ball. And whether we're running it well or if we're not running it efficiently, we need to stick with the run. We need to play keep away. We need to make sure that the Rams and their killer offense are on the sideline for as many minutes as possible in this game. What's it going to take to beat the Rams offense? The Niners defense and the Niners offense. The Niners defense cannot beat the Rams offense. The Niners defense might be able to slow down the Rams offense with the help of the Niner offense. So they're going to have to play, the Niners are going to have to play ball control. They're going to have to play ball control and dominate the time of possession. So Shanahan said he's going to talk to Brock Purdy today to determine if he'll be active as the number 2 quarterback. Mac Jones, though, will be getting the start. You got to give the Niners a shot just because of the presence of Robert Saleh and Shanahan. I mean, you got 2 of the better coaches in football right there. The Niners last year under Nick Sorensen were 29th in the NFL against the run. This year, they've lost Warner, they've lost Bosa, they've had injuries up front, and yet they are 6th in the NFL at stopping the run under Robert Saleh. So, they might be able to take away Kyron Williams. Then it's a matter of, can they put any heat on Stafford, or does he just sit back them and carve them up like a Thanksgiving turkey? The good news there, Bryce Huff is back, and Bryce Huff looked great this week at practice. I think that's going to help a lot. You're also going to see some exotic blitzes. The Niners have a bunch of guys. I was looking at the injury report yesterday after practice. So Ricky Pearsall with the PCL remains out. I mean, that is just a bummer too, because they really could use Ricky Pearsall, but he's out. Everybody else is questionable. So Purdy with the toe, but then Alfred Collins has got the hip. D. Winters has got a knee. Are we going to see Nick Martin? We may. Tatum Bethune's got a thigh, but I talked to him. He's going to go. Keon White's got a groin strain, but he's going to go. Kalia Davis, they had three guys pop up in the injury report late in the week. Keon White, Kalia Davis with the ankle, but I believe those guys are going to go. We'll see. And then Ben Barch is trying to work his way back from the ankle as well. Does Ben Barch start at left tackle or left guard? Does Spencer Burford start at left guard? Does Connor Colby start at left guard? I think that's kind of a question mark that we'll look for in the pregame. I would imagine if everybody's healthy, it's going to be Barch. But Burford did have a very effective game now last week against the Giants. He gave up a sack to Roches Nunez, the interior player that beat him inside for a sack. So that was the bad play. But the Niners did run the ball pretty effectively right behind Burford's backside. So he did a pretty nice job. Now, Jake Brendel is going to be back in this game. And some Niner fans are like, no, we don't want Jake Brendel back. But Jake Brendel will be back. He was activated off the IR. He's going to return to the lineup. The Niners feel really good about Jake Brendel and what he brings to the table. We'll see. That's all I'll really say about it. I'm hoping for the best. I can't really say what I expect to see in that one way or another. One of the interesting subplots to this game is the whole relationship between the Shanahan and McVay, because it's like McVay somehow gets lured into different. It's like the Niners came out a couple years ago and had like 18 play opening drive, and they just ran it down the Rams' throat. And the Rams had an advantage in the passing game, but they're like, oh, they want to run it on us, we're going to run it on them. And they had Sony Michel, and they tried to run it back at the Niners, and they got lured into this running game. And it wasn't their game, and the Niners won the game. So Shanahan just has a tendency to be able to kind of lure McVay into these kind of fist fights, where it's not really about speed and talent. It's more about, who can be tougher, who's going to run the ball between the tackles, and who's the tougher, more physical football team. And I hope McVay kind of falls for that again, because if he does, that plays right into the 49ers' hands. The Rams can score 40. I don't know that the Niners can. And especially with the Niners plan, which is going to be a heavy, balanced rushing, balanced attack, a lot of running, try to dominate the time of possession. I think they're going to try to take the air out of the ball and, slow the pace and make it, make it a tighter, make it a more of a physical run the ball, fewer possessions kind of a game. And I think that's probably the best game plan. One of the things I thought was important, listening to Tim Ryan talk to Papa and Silver early in the week on the Football Hour, and he's totally right about it. And I asked Kubiak about it. He said the Niners really, you always want to win on first and second down. What you do on first and second down leads to what comes up on third down. But against the Rams defense, you better be on point on first and second down. They have not given up a 3rd and 12 conversion all year, and it's week 10. They're the number 1 team in the league on 2nd and 11. So you can't, you got to be productive on first down. You can't have penalties on first down. You can't get into 3rd and long. 3rd and long against this Rams defense with Jared Verse and Agent Zero, Byron Young, and Braden Fisk. It is death. It is absolute death. They're gonna come after you. They're gonna hit your quarterback. They're gonna turn it into turnovers and gigantic negative plays. To me, the 49ers, it's not about how many big plays they make, it's about how many big plays they avoid. The big negative play, avoiding the big negative play is probably the key to victory in this matchup. The big negative play, the turnover, this quarterback sack, the fumble, the strip sack, the crushing penalties on first down. Those things are the things they got to avoid. They got to avoid third and long. If you get to third and long, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a really, really long day. So you got to play mistake-free football on first and second down. I think it's a major key for the 49ers. Um, I think you got to absolutely get a few hits on Stafford. He's got to know, he's got to feel the impact of your defense. And not only Stafford, Devontae, Devontae Adams and Kyron Williams. I mean, they have to feel the physicality of the 49er defense. If they don't, man, it could be a really, really long day. This Rams team's playing great ball. All right, let's take a timeout. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Rams with Scott Kaplan, who covers the Rams down in Southern California. He's a fantastic guest. He joins us next on Niners Nightly Meets the Weekend. Now we call it 49er Forecast on the Sports Leader.
Faithful, Larry Krueger's rocking the red and gold as 49ers forecast continues on KNBR, the sports leader. Sports leader.
And we are fired up to be with you on a Saturday. Beautiful Saturday here in Northern California. Larry Krueger with you on the Sports Leader. All right, Niners and Rams go tomorrow. We got a great guest here, Scott Kaplan. You probably know that name if you've been following sports in Northern California or Southern California for the last number of years. Longtime sports radio host, media entrepreneur, founder, CEO of his own social media platform. Probably best known for his Scott and BR show with Billy Ray Smith down in San Diego for years and years. Currently hosts Sedano and Cap on ESPN 710 in Southern California. His show is also available on Sirius XM. He's worked for Westwood One on the NFL Monday Night Football coverage. And he's with us on the Sports Leader on the UMA guest line. What's up, Scott? How are you?
Geez, Larry, that sounded like a lot. I mean, it sounded pretty good, but not like, I don't know, it sounded better than it is.
How you been?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. What a season already. I love football season, and just, this is the time of the year, man, where just so much is going on. And, while most other cities have been done with baseball, we just finished with baseball. So it's been very, very busy. How about you?
Oh, things are good, man. Things are really good. The whole back on KNBR, doing the whole YouTube thing in addition, and loving all of it. Working with my son a little bit, which is a real, I have 3 boys and a girl, but my oldest son helps me on my YouTube channel, and there's so much help that needs to be. I need so much help. So now he's like a full-time Krug show man. No, he's got his own deal going on as well. So now things are good. And, enjoying covering the Niners. That's what I'm doing most. First and foremost, I'm out there on the practice field every day. I'm at every presser. I'm at every game, everything. So it's it's that I really enjoy. I love. The football players, the coaches, the scouts, the whole football thing is great. So I'm loving it, man. I'm really enjoying it.
Dude, that's great. By the way,
I wanted to have you.
1 boy, 3 girls. 1 boy, 3 girls.
Okay.
I'm the total opposite of you.
There you go. I'll be paying for 1 wedding. You'll be paying for 3.
You got that right. You are so right.
You better save up. I've always loved your style, dude, because I don't want to say, people say, oh, Scott Kaplan, he's brutally honest. Well, no, he's just honest. It's funny how now people say brutally honest. No, being honest is just honest. And I've enjoyed your work in Southern California for decades now because of that. Because you're direct, you're honest, you're straightforward, you don't pull a lot of punches. Where did you develop your philosophy of broadcast?
Well, first of all, thanks for saying that. And it's funny because when you and I were talking earlier this week, just briefly, I was very much saying the same thing back to you, bro, because you are at it for a long time. You've been doing it really successfully, and being on KNBR is a big deal. I would say, if I really were thinking about it, I got done playing college football at the University of Pittsburgh in the early 90s, and I was still trying to make it in the NFL. And one of my college roommates, we still lived together because I think he'd gotten released by the Miami Dolphins. And so the two of us were still living in Pittsburgh together, both training and trying to get back into the NFL. And we would sit around every night, and I would watch Howard Stern on E! And I thought, you know what, man, I want to do that with sports. And I got to be honest with you, that's kind of really where it all started.
Wow. And you've been doing it for a lot of years. I mean, a number of years. And let's talk a little bit about this matchup, this Niners-Rams matchup. It seems like, McVay's got the ring, but in the relationship between Shanahan and McVay, it's almost like, it seems like Shanahan's more the master and McVay's more the pupil than the opposite. Yeah. But McVay's got that ring, and obviously Shanahan is still eluding him at this point. How do you see that relationship? And because it seems like McVay always gets lured into these kind of like, who's tougher between me and Kyle. and especially in that first matchup, he's running it on 4th and 1, despite the fact on an earlier 4th and 1 in the same game, Stafford found Puka, and it was like there was almost no defense at all to defend it, and yet they didn't go back to that with the game on the line.
I know. It's so funny because I think of McVay as being so creative, and there are times in games where he just is not creative. And those are, good example, like that first game that you were talking about. It drives me nuts. Everybody, first of all, we love Sean, and we think he's a great coach down here. And those of us who are around the Rams, we do. He's very, very innovative, and the way he coaches his coaches is super innovative. But for whatever reason, there are times during games where he will go much more conservative than you would expect, especially given what you were saying. There's evidence from earlier in the game. Well, he's going to do something a bit more creative. He also loves to kick short field goals, particularly when on the road. And I always argue that you should never kick field goals that are shorter than extra points when you're on the road unless you're taking the lead late in the game. And so he has this tendency, as great of a coach as he is, and I do think he's a great coach, to sometimes get a bit conservative. And I understand why he wants to outmuscle Kyle, I do. But the offensive line is not really the strength of your team. The strength of your offense in particular is your quarterback, his brain, his arm, and the fact that you've got a lot of guys for him to throw to. So that always kind of confuses me as well.
The Rams are intriguing because, like, here the structure is Shanahan was hired and Lynch is his hand-picked general manager. So Shanahan is the central figure, and McVay is the central figure there. But I get the sense that maybe Snead is more his equal and more his like maybe the personnel show is really the Snead show, and McVay is only contributing loosely. And this is just my perception of the situation. What is the relationship like between the GM there, Les Snead, and Sean McVay?
I would say that I would describe the two of them together as completely equitable partners. Not 51-49, not 60-40. I mean, legitimate 50-50. We're co-founders of this company together. And I think that those guys have an incredible relationship, and they're lucky. They're both young guys. I say they're lucky. They're young. They've been together for a long time. Neither one of them is particularly ego-driven. McVay, for a young man, he is incredibly grounded, and a lot of that people have documented what's happened to him, after the Super Bowl year, and then they were terrible the following year, and he contemplated retiring and, thought about going into TV. He's just an incredibly grounded, younger man. And Les Snead is just slightly older, but he's also very calm, very Southern Alabama kind of guy living in Southern California. They're living the Southern California life too. I mean, make no mistake, these guys are living a very, very good life, living in the suburbs of LA, in one of the most desirable places in Southern California. And they're living a great life. So these guys are not arguing, and egos are not becoming involved. And believe me, I've seen plenty of that in my days. One of my most famous was Marty Schottenheimer and A.J. Smith down with the San Diego Chargers, and those two guys just couldn't be on the same page. Unlike that, McVay and Snead, these guys are 50-50 partners.
Now, where do they live in L.A.? Because, I've got family in L.A. My wife's got some family that lives in Palos Verdes, and when we go there, I'm always like, hey, let's live here, honey. Let's live here in Palos Verdes. It's like it's right. It's like in the water almost. It's a little foggy and whatnot, but I know that's quite a bit. That's hard to get out there. It's hard to commute, whether you work for the Dodgers or if you work for. It's hard to live at the beach and down in the Southland there. But where are these guys? What's their community of choice?
Well, the facility, the team facility, the owner, Stan Kroenke, who built this incredible $5 billion SoFi Stadium, which has completely changed the city of Inglewood, as they predicted it would years ago when they started building it. They also have a facility up in the Valley area of LA and the Thousand Oaks area. And they've built and they are they're in the middle of building a full, like what is in Green Bay, where they've got like Titletown right next to the stadium, or in New England, where they've got hotels and restaurants and malls and things right next to the stadium. So they're building something similar in the Valley. And while the stadium is probably, call it 45 or 50 miles, maybe not that far, maybe 35 miles, but they're building a whole other complex where their practice facility is. And so they're just brilliant owners and real estate moguls. And, besides obviously owning the Rams, the Cronkies, they own the Nuggets, they own the Avalanche. So they're great sports owners, and they're multi-billionaires who do not spare expense for any of their franchises.
Yeah, so Simi Valley, basically, Thousand Oaks up there, like northwest LA.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what, let's talk about Kroenke for a second, because Kroenke, bought the team, and then, Snead was making some good picks, but then he was making some bad picks. Good picks, bad picks, good picks, bad picks. And then it seemed like they built SoFi, and Kroenke was like, we need to win the Super Bowl. We need to put our, stake our flag in Southern California. There's a lot of Chargers, Rams, or a lot of Niners, Raiders. There's all kinds of fans down there that aren't Rams fans, that used to be Rams fans. We need to win. It seemed like they had a change of philosophy, and then here came the veterans. Here came Ramsey and Stafford and Von Miller, and it's almost like they bought their way because they weren't drafting efficiently enough to build that team, and it worked. Did that kind of game plan come from Kroenke, you think, that he wanted to appear in a Super Bowl and kind of reestablish the Rams in Southern California?
Yeah, I would say that Kroenke is, he's the money, he's the executive producer of the film, if you will. And Kevin Demoff is the president of the team, and maybe his title is CEO. But the point is, Kevin Demoff is a local, he grew up in LA. He understands the market. He moved with the team from St. Louis. And he's another one of these younger guys. Kevin Demoff might be 50 years old. And, so you have between Snead and McVay and also Demoff, these guys they're young, and they've got this great team amongst them. Demoff, I think, is a driving force in understanding that there is a battle in the market, because while the Chargers were not welcome in LA, they weren't wanted in LA. They're cultivating a fan base, as much as that pains me to actually admit, because of course, when they moved out of San Diego, that was kind of the end of it for me. Just the way they treated the city, and I got myself way too involved in that whole mess back then. But Kevin Demoff really understood the Super Bowl is going to be in our stadium, and winning it would be an incredible advantage when trying to win the market for, in particular, corporate dollars and fans, of course, and brand ambassadorship and so on. And they took control of the LA market by winning that Super Bowl. And this year they think they have another opportunity to win a Super Bowl. Obviously, yet to be seen. And then they're going to host another Super Bowl. So they've really done a great job of working their way back into the fabric of LA and being an important part of all the things that are happening, from the Olympics that are coming to the World Cup that will be a part of this community. The Rams are very much the leaders when it comes to the football world in this town.
We're talking a little Niners-Rams with Scott Kaplan, media monster, with us on the Yuma guest line on 49er Forecast here on this Saturday. It's interesting when you talk Niners and Rams how many second-generation football people there are here. I mean, you've got John Lynch. He's got his son Jake as the defensive quality control guy for the Niners. You got Mike Shanahan, obviously he's up for the Hall of Fame. Kyle, obviously, coaching the Niners. You have Rich Snead, the father of Les Snead, longtime Raider, I believe, employee. You got Les, his son. You got Sean McVay, the grandson of John McVay, who's in the 49er Hall of Fame. You got Mike LaFleur, who's the whole LaFleur connection. Then you've got Chris Shula, the grandson of Don Shula, as the defensive coordinator. I want to talk about him for a second. I think in some ways he might be one of the rising stars in the sport. What can you tell us about Don Shula's grandson and his impact on this Rams defense?
Well, I loved everything you just documented. I always love when these kinds of games come and you can put together the connections. John Lynch and his son Jake Lynch, I've known those guys, well, since Jake was a little tiny kid, and my son and Jake grew up same community, playing high school football against each other, and we're always close. And John Lynch's dad, Larry, I'm sure you know this.
It's a
John
radio
Lynch's
guy,
dad
right?
is one of the most. He started Extra Sports 690 in San Diego and Los Angeles. He launched the career of Jim Rome, and John and his sister Kara. They grew up in the radio business, and I worked for John's dad, John Sr., for many years building the mighty 1090. So I
love that
John
station,
Lynch.
by the way. I love that station back in the day when they had Hacksaw Hamilton. Excellent topic, my friend. I'm glad you brought it up. Let's go to the hopper. It looks like the Patriots have a new special teams coach. I mean, it was like unbelievable. Hacksaw back in the day.
Right. So
great
Hacksaw, myself, Billy Ray, like we all, grew up with John Lynch. And by the way, that was when radio was in a whole different world, So John Lynch Jr., we grew up going to his high school games. And I say, grew up, I mean, we all worked in radio. High school is a little bit preceded my time, but, his Stanford days and his Buccaneers days. And we all got to see John Jr. win the Super Bowl in San Diego and watch his son become a really nice player and his daughter become a good, athlete. And so known the Lynches really well for a really long time. And there is so much intermingling of names that you're talking about. And when you get to Chris Shula, obviously Chris Shula, Don Shula's grandson, and this is how the NFL works. Grandpa was a very famous and successful head coach, and grandson eventually gets an opportunity. And he and McVay are like, longtime brothers, college roommates. And so they go way, way back. And Chris has become an excellent coordinator. And one of the things that McVay does so well, Larry, is he brings in other coaches when they're available. And I can tell you that my college roommate, Alex Van Pelt, who was the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots last year, is on the Rams staff, and he's the senior offensive assistant. And what he does is he works with Chris Shula, game planning about, what the other offenses might do. And it's really amazing because when you look at Van Pelt and you look at McVay, they're connected through, I would say, John Gruden, because Gruden was one of our college coaches, and Gruden was one of the mentors to McVay and his brother. So there's just so many connections that go round and round between coaching staffs, and in particular in this game.
Well, and it's, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, as they say. And to me, I enjoy, a lot of people, nepotism. No, you don't understand. This is the family business. This is what they talk about at the dinner table. When you talk about football at the dinner table and you're 10 and 11 and 12 and 13, my dad was a lawyer. We talked about legal cases in our family, and my sister's a lawyer, my brother's a lawyer, my brother's now a judge. It's like, so it's and my dad, he said, and Larry, you're the most argumentative of all of us. I'm like, thank you. I'll find my way in another field. But let's talk about Shula's defense, because they added Poona Ford from the Chargers, and I know that's kind of that's not a name that grabs headlines. But you know what? Poona Ford is one of the great interior run-stuffing, A-gap controlling players of his era. He was awesome at Texas. He's been good everywhere, pretty much. And now you add him to this line that has great pass rushers with Byron Young, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Kobe Turner. I mean, everybody can go hunt quarterbacks. And now you got Poona kind of occupying guys in the middle. What does this line look like this year with the addition of Ford?
Oh, he's been a great addition, to your point. I mean, an outstanding run blocking, just a guy who just eats up offensive linemen. And I say it like that not to be, ridiculous. It's just that he's such a big, strong physical presence. So, they got to double team a guy like him. And when you add a player like that, you said it, kind of an under the radar thing. What the Rams have done, this goes back to Les Snead, his part and his job is find the best players. And when they knew Aaron Donald was not long for the league any longer, they went out and they drafted over the 2 years guys like you mentioned, Kobe Turner, Brian Young. Then they drafted Jared Verse, who's become a really excellent young player, and Braden Fisk in the same draft, who also maybe a little less well known, but a really good run stopper and a guy who can actually get to the quarterback. So they've done a great job over the past maybe 3 years or so of preparing, knowing Aaron Donald was going to be gone, and they weren't going to replace him with one guy. They were going to replace him with 5 guys, and that's what they did. And then maybe their best move, and this is one thing about the Rams. Sometimes you're lucky, and that's just the way it goes. And then sometimes you have really good scouting. So Jimmy Lake, who is the senior defensive assistant for the Rams, he was the defensive coordinator for Raheem Morris and the Atlanta Falcons last year. Jimmy Lake's name you may know because he was a head coach at Washington. Well, Jimmy now has come back to the Rams because he was previously the assistant head coach for the Rams, but he went to Atlanta. Well, Jimmy Lake comes back and he tells Sean McVay and Les Snead, hey, there's this guy who we had in Atlanta. His name is Nate Landman, and he's an interesting story. And you know what? We can get him really cheap. He's an undrafted free agent out of Colorado. He's kind of been hurt a little bit, but when he's played, he's done well. But he's an undrafted free agent. Atlanta just doesn't have, for whatever reason, they don't see what I see in him. So the Rams signed him as a free agent, but he was, again, 3 years ago, he was undrafted. He's the captain, an undrafted free agent out of Colorado who couldn't really stick with the Atlanta Falcons. He's the captain of the Rams defense. He's the play caller, and he's the guy who's starting to get known because he's the punch-out guy. So he has probably had 3 or 4 legitimate punch-outs where he puts his fist on the ball and creates a turnover. So, it's amazing. They've got all these talented guys who they've drafted in the defensive front, or they went out and signed Poona Ford in free agency, but they got real lucky in their scouting of a guy named Nate Landman, who's had a really big year so far.
Well, and the Rams have been really good on the personnel side. I mean, Cam Curl didn't work out with the Commanders, and they added him. You look around, they've been opportunistic. I mean, they've made some really, really good decisions. Emmanuel Forbes is a high percentage interceptor. Didn't work out with the Commanders. They signed him. I was talking to Kubiak, the Niners offensive coordinator. He was really impressed by Quentin Lake. I mean, that's a 6th-round pick in the 22 draft out of UCLA by Snead. And look what Quentin Lake is doing as the nickel back, and they play a lot of nickel. They play some dime, and Lake gives them an opportunity because he's so smart to just do everything back there. So the Rams have made some under-the-radar pickups that have really helped them turn this thing around. Usually you say goodbye to Aaron Donald. It takes you 4 or 5 years to build up that front. They did it in 2 years. I mean, and then they got a pretty good defense top to bottom here.
And you know what? You talk about connections. We were just talking about all these coaching connections and all these family names. Quentin Lake, you know who his father was or is?
No.
His father, Carnell Lake.
Oh, Carnell Lake, the
Remember
Steeler.
Carnell Lake?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The Steelers. I mean, he was a really, really good DB with the Steelers when Bill Cowher was the coach. And they went to the Super Bowl. They had Rod Woodson in that secondary. And Kevin Green was, their pass rusher. And Greg Lloyd, if you remember these names. I can't believe they're even coming to me right now.
Joey Porter.
Yeah. So they had a really good squad. Carnell Lake, this is his son, Quentin Lake. So yeah, again, kind of this is the family business in a lot of ways.
We're talking to Scott Kaplan. Niners and Rams go tomorrow on the leader, and big game for both teams. These two coaches there's a lot of similarities. They work together in Washington, a lot of similarities. I really do think McVay and Shanahan are two of the very best doing it. And they were hired in the same year, and they're always going to be compared to one another. They're really good coaches, but they're also really intense competitors, and they've done it differently. Mm-hmm. Shanahan believes in the old school thinking of, man, you gotta build up calluses to handle the NFL rigors of a full season. So they go at it and they hit pretty hard, and the Niners have been hurt a lot, and they're hurt a lot now.
Yeah.
McVay is like, hey, we're getting to week 1, and our money is going to be on the field week 1, and we're not putting our guys out there at all in the preseason. I don't even know if the Stafford injury this summer was legit the way he's playing. Yeah. What do you make of the two different styles? Obviously, McVay's got to feel good. The Rams have 3 guys on the injury report. The Niners have 15 guys on injured reserve. But it's two different approaches to preparing your football team for sure.
Yeah, I know it's really amazing the what they call the Sports Injury Central. That's a buddy of mine. He monitors all of these injuries, and then he gives you a score. And the Rams are like one of the most healthy teams in the NFL, and the Niners are one of the least healthy. In fact, they may even be the least healthy team in the NFL. I'm sure you would know. I mean, obviously, all these names that are on the injury list. I'm with you about Stafford. It's interesting. I kind of thought that he'd be dealing with a back problem the whole season. And there are some times where he gets hit and he gets up and you go, man, I hope he's all right. But generally, you've not heard one thing about Stafford's back, which is what kept him out of preseason training camp. And so it is interesting that Stafford, at his age, is really having statistically his best season. And he had a lot of Hall of Fame caliber seasons when he was in Detroit. I mean, a lot of big numbers, but not much to show for it, obviously. Stafford's back seems to be fine. The team, I must say, is healthier than they have been in years past. Usually offensive line is a place where teams really suffer, and the Rams are no different. But this year they've been generally healthy. I'm not saying all 5 starters at the beginning of the year are all in, but guys have missed games here and there. Avila, Havenstein, they've missed here and there, but generally they're healthier right now than they have been in years past, especially up front on the O-line.
What's your prediction? We'll let you go with this one. I think it's going to be a close game. All these games between the Niners and Rams are, but man, some people think it's going to be the Rams in a walk. What do you envision?
I just think it all does come down to what we were just talking about. I think it all comes down to health. I think that the Niners have too many guys that are hurt in key positions. I think about Fred Warner getting hurt the last time these two teams played. I think the Rams win this game because they have to win this game. You cannot drop 2 games to your conference rival, and you've already given up one that you probably, I wouldn't say should have won because you were down 14-0, but you could have won that game. The Rams could have won that game at home. So I think the Rams are going to win this game. I'll say 27-20.
Scott, good rapping with you. Best of luck to you going forward. Enjoyed your work for a long time. Keep it rolling down there, and thanks for jumping on KNBR and giving us a little thumbnail preview of the matchup tomorrow.
Hey, Larry, huge fan of yours. Thank you so much for all the kind words, and really appreciate the conversation, man. This was awesome.
We'll do it again. Maybe I was looking at the playoff matchups. I think it's a pretty good chance that the Niners and Rams lock horns a third time in the playoffs. So if that happens, as I'm anticipating, we'll call you back.
All right, looking forward to it.
Thanks, Scott. Have a good one. Scott Kaplan stopping by on 49er Forecast. We'll come back, couple last thoughts, and we'll wrap it up on the Sports Leader.
Faithful 49ers forecast with Larry Krueger now continues on your proud home of 49ers football. KNBR, the sports leader.
And we're coming down the home stretch on 49ers forecast. Larry Krueger with you. It's funny, as I'm doing the show, I'm watching the Niners-Rams in the first matchup at SoFi. And I'll tell you, just watching it again, the thing that really stood out is that when Mac Jones got to the top of his drop, the ball came out. The Rams, the Niners line's not killer, and the Rams D line is killer. But the pressure, most of those hits that he took were second half hits. First half, he didn't take a lot of hits. He got to the top of the drop, and the ball came out. So it'll be interesting to see if the Rams defensive line, who wins that battle between the Niner O-line and the Ram D-line. Brendel's back in there. You got, who knows, at left guard, maybe Burford, maybe Ben Barch. Maybe they'll go back to Barch. Can the Niners run the ball against the Rams? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a really interesting game. Let's talk a little bit about a couple factors in this game. One, the middle of the field. That's where I think this thing's going to get decided. ESPN had their little breakdown, and they went through a bunch of different factors. The one factor I thought was kind of interesting, Mac Jones in the middle of the field is where he's finding lots of success. He leads all NFL quarterbacks in passing value to the middle of the field based on the defense-adjusted yards above replacement metric, DR. So if you walk up to somebody, hey, the Mac Jones is great because he's awesome on DR. See what people say. What? He's awesome on what? What's DR? Oh, DR? You don't know DR? It's defense adjusted yards above replacement. Oh, yeah. You're not conversant in your DR? Mac Jones has been really good in the middle of the field. That's all you really need to know. He leads all quarterbacks in passing value to the middle of the field based on DR, the DR metric. But the Rams are really good in the middle of the field. They rank 7th in defensive DVOA on passes up the middle. So I think that's where it gets decided right there. Also, if the Niners, can just dominate the time of possession and just, stay on the field, keep Stafford on the sideline, I think that's going to be the big key for the 49ers. All right, that's going to do it for us. JD is getting the pipes warmed up. He's live next. Just Dubs. Warriors lost to the Nuggets. Can they win ever on the road? Are they too old? Will they make it to June? JD answers all those questions next. Just Dubs. We'll see you tomorrow on The Sports Leader.
Dub Nation. Dub Nation.
Big fat dub.
Whenever we can, wherever we can, we're talking hoops. And you know our guys will ramble.
Can you just email me the rest of this story?
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson.
Dickinson's an underrated talent, 100%.
On KNBR 104.5 and 6.8. Streaming live at knbr.com and on the KNBR app.
All right, welcome in. Just Dubs on a Saturday. It's John Dickinson with you here on The Sports Leader, our inaugural show for the 2025-26 season, getting things tipped off and a show that we're happy to have back here on The Sports Leader. Going to be coming up after Krug and 49er Forecast at 11 o'clock throughout the course of the fall here. And then whenever the 49ers are done, which obviously everybody in the Bay is hoping that's going to be closer to the end of January or the early part of February, we'll take over with the 2-hour shows. If we need to be preempted, we'll be on YouTube only from time to time. But great to have this show back here on Saturday mornings to complement our Dubs OT shows, which, of course, you can hear after every Warriors game, including last night's debacle in Denver as the Nuggets thumped the Warriors 129-104. And tomorrow night, we'll be back at it, typically from Harmonic Brewing in Thrive City, right next to Chase Center. We do the shows following each and every Warriors home game, but not quite everyone. We got a couple Niner conflicts. The Niners are playing tomorrow against the Rams, as you've heard Krug talking about here over the course of the last hour. So we will have a Dubs OT show tomorrow following the Warriors and the Nuggets, but tomorrow one of the few, I think that the number is 2 or 3, that we're not going to be able to have it at Harmonic and Thrive City due to our 49ers obligations, but we will still have a show for you. I'm going to be high atop Levi's Stadium following Niner postgame and keeping tabs on the Warriors and the Indiana Pacers and what becomes a real much-needed victory for Golden State before they head back out on the road for the next 2 weeks. The Warriors in the midst of this 10 games in 12 away, and it's about to be 6 straight away here. And you heard Krug asking a few questions that we are definitely going to get into. Truncated show, only going to be with you here till about 11:45. So you can jump in and join the conversation if you want to talk some Dubs at 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Golden State Lumber and Showroom text line open as well. And those watching on YouTube and Twitch, we appreciate you for doing so on this Saturday morning. So let's get into it. And it really, to this point, has been a tale of two teams. And we can talk about last night's game specifically, but we did a lot of that last night. So I want to kind of make everything in the 45 minutes that we're going to be on the air this morning more about the big picture as to where this Warriors team sits 10 games into the season. Now they get off to a 4-1 start. Now they're 1-4 in the last 5. They let a couple of games slip away in Milwaukee and Indiana when they were much closer to full strength themselves, and their opposition, without Giannis Antetokounmpo and without Tyrese Halliburton and others for Indiana, the Warriors let a couple of games that they had right there in their pocket get away, and now that has caught up with them in addition to the schedule and the injuries and the rest nights and all of the things that the Warriors believed that they had built a roster to help mitigate. And unfortunately, you look at this thing now 10 games in, and it looks very much similar to the way things looked last year before the Jimmy Butler trade and the way things looked 2 years ago with the Warriors' inability to win away from Chase Center. Now 1-5 or 1-5 rather on the road, and 5 straight road losses for the Warriors after winning on opening night against the Lakers down in Southern California. They are 4-0 at home, but you add it up and it's 5-5. And again, the 2 games that have sort of spurred the turn here to the negative are those games going back in Milwaukee and Indiana that the Warriors couldn't get when things were going pretty well after their 4-1 start, and then the injuries catch up. Jimmy Butler dealing with a back, and Draymond dealing with a rib, and Steph Curry winds up playing through some illness in Milwaukee and Indiana, comes back, plays well enough for the Warriors to get a win that they had to work probably a little too hard to get against Phoenix, and that means everybody's got to take the night off in Sacramento, and if everybody takes the night off, we know what that's meant for the Warriors. Hell, when Steph takes the night off, we know what that's meant for the Warriors, but no Steph, no Jimmy, no Draymond in Sacramento, and it's really been a tale of a couple of different games. The Warriors go to Sacramento, and a lot of the young guys look pretty good, but still good enough to get you beat, even against a Kings team that was missing 3 starters of their own, but still I think had more NBA talent on their roster, guys that had done some things in the league, whether it's a Russell Westbrook or a DeMar DeRozan or a Dennis Schroeder and the like there. So the Warriors finding themselves in this similar position, unfortunately, that they found themselves in as it relates to being good enough to get through the regular season while also meeting the demands of Steph Curry can't play every game. And Jimmy Butler's not going to play every game, and Draymond Green's not going to play every game. But they felt that they had built a roster with enough other veterans and young players to complement each other to the point where they could get through the regular season and win enough to where it was not going to get super dicey down the final 2 months of the year where it felt like the Warriors would have to go all in an attempt to get victories to try and make a late run. As it was 2 years ago, it was a late run just to get into the play-in tournament and avoid not even being in the top 10, and they ultimately did that, but they had to go 27-12 in the final 39 games of the season just to get to that point. And then last year they had to go 23-8 in the final 31 after the Jimmy Butler trade to get to the final game of the season, where they had a shot if they won that game to avoid the play-in tournament. Ultimately, they lost that game to the Clippers, ended up the 7 seed, had to go through the play-in tournament, which they did, knock out the Rockets, but the whole thing comes crumbling down because they had to work so hard against the Rockets and to get in. I think over the course of those last 2 months that physically Steph breaks down against Minnesota in a game they win. They show you they could absolutely compete last year with Minnesota, but then Steph goes down. So how do the Warriors mitigate all of that? And to this point, it just has not been it looked like, I always say this, and I mentioned it last night on Dubs OT. So those of you that are joining us that heard it last night, I am going to be repeating myself, but it's a new audience here on a Saturday morning as well. And the one thing I always say about depth, there's 2 different kinds of depth, and it plays, I think, in the NFL as well as it does in the NBA. There's the kind of depth that you have and you like when you have all your main guys playing. Right? You got Steph, you got Jimmy, you got Draymond, and then all of a sudden you like Pajemski playing next to those guys, and he can be a real useful connector-type player. And you know what? Jonathan Kuminga's looked for the first 5-6 games of the year like a completely new player. Rebounding, looking to pass, bringing intensity to the table consistently on the defensive side, taking advantage of what the defense gives him. In terms of trying to get to the cup and get to the free throw line, and giving up on the mid-range jumpers, and taking open threes if he's dared to, but really looking to pass and be a player that can be a quality role player with everybody else. Moses Moody fits into that mold, and we've seen him probably be the best fit of the Warrior young players in that mold. But when you have the main guys and you have the main guys engaged, if not playing well, then you like that depth. And then you pepper in a Buddy Hield, and then you get a little bit of Quentin Post, and then maybe you mix in GP2, who has not had a great start to the season. Al Horford can come along and help you beat Denver a couple of weeks ago, although unfortunately that's been the one game where Al Horford has played well here to begin the season, and Horford winds up out dealing with a foot issue and unable to play last night in Denver in a game where Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green returned. So you've got that kind of depth that you like when you have everybody, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have the depth that can get you through when you don't have everybody. And I think that's been the thing over these last couple of games that has really rung true, unfortunately, as Steve Kerr tries to formulate a rotation with the main guys, and then how the Warriors want to play without the main guys. But to this point, one of the big key questions, and I think the schedule certainly has been part of it, although I'm kind of sick of everybody complaining about the schedule. And the reason I'm kind of sick of everybody complaining about the schedule, and I know it's unheard of based on what people have seen throughout long tenures of covering or working in the NBA. But the Warriors thought they built a team that could withstand it. And they thought they built a team that was going to win the games they should win, and then be able to, along the way, give the veteran players the rest that they need to keep everybody fresh. They believe they have a roster capable of doing it. And so if it proves that they don't have a roster capable of doing that, then I'm sorry, but even early in the year, while the schedule will, I think, even out for them, they got a ton of home games at the beginning of January with, I think, one road game in L.A. against the Clippers. They're going to have a more favorable schedule toward the back end of the season, the last couple of weeks in the lead up to the playoffs and or the play-in. But it's kind of on them, in my opinion, to navigate this. And they believe that they did enough to be able to navigate it. So if that does not prove to be true, then to me, they are the ones who need to be held accountable for not shaping the roster in a way to where they could get through it. And, there are a couple of things that I think are debatable as to how they built this. They, to me, are lacking somebody that can get their own bucket when Steph's not on the court. And this is not anything new. This is something that was a topic of, the offseason. Do you look to go get some kind of a backup point guard that can score? I think the whole Kuminga trade situation wound up being, with the issues related to being able to trade him and the value that you could get back, and there wasn't enough value you could get back, both in terms of the contract and the player. But it kind of went back to that whole debate of, should you just trade Jonathan Kuminga for a capable role player that can be kind of a lead guard off the bench that maybe is not a playoff type player when everybody's healthy and whole, but is somebody that helps you get through the regular season and maybe puts you over the top in a game like the game on Wednesday night in Sacramento, where the young guys, for the most part, play pretty well, but they just needed a little more punch to be able to get over the top in a game like that, or somebody that has any punch in a game like last night against Denver, where the Nuggets are just kind of having their way with the Warriors and doing whatever they want offensively. And it's one of those games where you just feel immediately like the Warriors are going to have no semblance of an ability to kind of keep up. And you may say, well, JD, it's about defense. What about the defense? And that's been another problem for the Warriors. They've been pretty awful defensively, with the exception of a couple of games. Down the stretch in the game against Denver, in the game that they won a couple of weeks ago, and the Clippers game. And really, that's been it in terms of quality defense. So this team has not, I think, shown a willingness or a connectivity to play defense. But if you're going to be and in the regular season, a lot of teams are that way. The problem is, in the regular season, a lot of teams try to win games with their offense, and I think what the Warriors are seeing is they just don't have enough offense when Steph Curry's not on the court to be able to function and win those games at that level, to where, if they have a little bit more in a Milwaukee game or an Indiana game, maybe they are able to hang on and win those games when they have leads in the fourth quarter. Maybe they are able to have enough to withstand when Sacramento comes back against them after a really good first half in Sacramento the other night. And so, all of those things as it relates to roster composition, I think are important to note here, because it does come a question of, is this team good enough? Are they talented enough? It's almost two different teams. And I think, the team that they have when they have everybody and they are rested and they aren't having to fly halfway across the country and back, I think you like that team. But the reality is that team is not – that's not how an 82-game season works. You don't get to keep that team on ice, in an attempt to just, play every other day and 2 days off in between. That's how the playoffs work. And so I think what you can make the case that you like the team – if you're the Warriors that could get into the playoffs, the question is, are they going to get there? Are they going to be good enough to get there? And are they going to be good enough to get there without having to work so hard to get there that they wind up in a lot of trouble? And so I think that's where things sit here to begin this 2025-26 season. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Let's go ahead and take a quick time out here. If you want to jump in on the phone lines, you can. If you want to jump into the YouTube chat, you can as well. It's just Dubs. We're off and rolling here on a Saturday here on the Sports Leader. We'll come back. We're also going to take a look at what's ahead for the Warriors, because the schedule is daunting in terms of travel. I mean, they're just getting started as it relates to back-to-backs and travel and flying to Denver and coming back, and you're here for a game. And then, I mean, it is just getting started. How do the Warriors withstand these next 3 weeks or so? I think it's going to be a true tell as to where their season sits and what they maybe have to do to adjust this roster moving forward to be able to handle the long haul of a season. What do you think of the young players to this point? Again, I think we've seen a lot of positives, but the positives have mostly been on nights where you're either playing against an under-talented Sacramento team or you're playing with the main guys that are on the roster. Not a lot of carry in terms of the young players on nights where they get opportunities to step up and step in with a guy like Steph Curry out. Is that part of the way the Warriors built the roster or not? We can get into that as well here as we kind of break down the Warriors to begin this 25-26 season. So let's take a quick timeout. We'll come back. It's Just Dubs with JD right here on the Sports Leader.
Live from downtown.
Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
And then he just put that holster up and then let it go. Big dog. Is that number 30 or 23? Another triple for Draymond Green, his 5th of the ball game.
All right, Draymond Green, one of the bright spots last night, but not nearly enough as he hits 5 3-pointers in the game. But the Warriors blown out by the Nuggets. 129-104, the final in Denver. Warriors back home tomorrow against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers, who still have just one win on the season. They are 1-7, and the one win was a week ago tonight in Indianapolis, and they beat the Warriors for their lone victory. That's a game that I think still stings and probably stings for the Warriors a lot more given the way this week has played out, having to play the game on Wednesday in Sacramento without any of Stephen Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green, and taking an L to the Kings, and then really a non-competitive loss to the Nuggets. I think that's probably the most disappointing aspect of last night. I don't think anybody in their right mind would have expected the Warriors to go to Denver without Steph and win on a night where Denver plays well, and Jokic is doing his thing, and they're hitting all kinds of threes in the second quarter, and they get off to basically an 18-6 start, and it feels like, oh, well, this game is probably going to be over right here. They're up, I think, 11 at the end of the first quarter, but then the Warriors do make a push early second quarter to cut it to 1, and then Denver, that's when they really got hot in the non-Jokic minutes and opened up a lead that they would pretty much carry throughout the course of the night. I don't think the Warriors ever got it inside about 12 at any point really in the second half, and when they did, it was just briefly. It felt like the game was more 14, 16, 20, and 22. It really turned ugly when Steve Kerr emptied the bench with about 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But I think the most disappointing aspect of a game like last night was just the non-competitive nature of the way the Warriors played. Like, they played like a team that felt it was a wrap at the opening tip, and there was just no compete, no dog. And I think the one thing that you would expect on a night where you don't have Steph is that offense is going to be at a premium, and the ability to score is going to be something that's going to be difficult. But the one thing I think the non-Steph Warriors identity is defense. And I think it really starts with the guys that are on the court. The traditional non-Steph start of the second, start of the fourth quarter lineup when the Warriors are fully healthy, and even you saw, I think, a version of this last night. But that lineup it's basically Podziemski, Moody, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and Quentin Post. So it's a group that the Warriors can go to and defend a little bit, and not because you're running through things through Jimmy, he can get some shots for Quentin Post, and Podziemski can kind of be the connector, and maybe Moses Moody knocks down some open looks. But the identity truly of that group, I think, is the defense with Jimmy and with Draymond. And Draymond especially, not playing the 5, the ability to kind of roam around with that group. Moses Moody, point of attack. Podziemski can kind of rotate and take charges and do the things that he does. The non-Steph identity of the Warriors is supposed to be defense. And so you would hope, I think, if you're a Warrior fan, that there would be a forceful, physical nature to the way the Warriors are playing in these games without Steph, and that's just been something that last night I think is the most disappointing part. I mean, just no feel of any kind of physicality or any kind of competitiveness against a Denver team that I do think is the second best team in the Western Conference, probably the second best team in the NBA behind Oklahoma City. And the Thunder continue to roll here to begin the year. But that's the part that I think is probably the most disappointing when you just look at a game like last night. And so, this team has lost, I think, a little bit of what they had at the end of last year. And we talked about it a lot on Dubs OT. We talked about it a lot on Just Dubs on these Saturday mornings toward the end of the year post Jimmy Butler trade. Just how hard the Warriors had to play down the stretch to win those games that they did in the 23-8 finish. And they won a ton of them. And look, half of the losses were games where Steph or Jimmy, one of the two, somebody was out even. So the record when they had everybody was even better. And the one thing that team really did last year too, in comparison to this year, they won on the road. They were motivated on the road. If anything, it was the home games in which maybe they were, I don't want to say less motivated, but felt they could coast a little bit more and still win with a great, shorter stretch of play. But the road games, they were super locked in, something to prove, wanted to get every win possible. And they've lost that kind of edge and that mentality that they had. And it was not going to be something that was going to be easy to be carried forward by any stretch into an 82-game season. It would be foolish to think that they would be able to play at that level. I mean, it was completely off the table. I mean, 23-8 is a ridiculous pace. I mean, you're talking about basically playing, 750 basketball at that point. I mean, that is ridiculous and was not going to be able to be kept up. But they haven't really had any of that compete in them this year to this point. And I think that the question becomes, how do they get it back? Can they get it back? When do they get it back? Because I think the Jimmy Butler trade was the infusion that kind of changed everything for the Warriors at the deadline. And so that's when it became go time. They were basically a 500, actually one under 500 team at the moment of the trade. And so but they locked in. They found a rotation very quickly, and they basically kept the same rotation for the most part between that point and the end of the regular season. Kuminga came back. He was injured for most of it. He didn't quite fit into the plans at that point, so he was kept out of the rotation until Steph got hurt in Minnesota. But they just found the group, and right now I think the Warriors are finding themselves in this stretch of you've got all these guys, all this depth, all these guys you want to play, and not enough minutes to go around, but yet you're also not maximizing your best lineups because you're tinkering. And I think it was working out all right the first handful of games, but as you get into the every night, every other night, back-to-back grind, that consistency is more what you need, but that consistency is also what you're less likely to have because you have such a veteran-laden team with guys in and out of the lineup, and then you're fluctuating the roles of some of the young players to be able to absorb some of the slack. And, the gap, I think, between the young players and the way that they looked against a team like Sacramento and then what they look like against a true contending team against Denver, I mean, wow. I mean, just startling. And so I think with the schedule that's coming up, and we're going to get into that here in our final short segment, but I think it's time for Steve Kerr, as Steph has the potential to return tomorrow, and they're going to have this stretch here coming up. I think the time has come for Steve Kerr to settle in on the best rotation that can try to get them as many wins as they can to prevent this thing from getting to a point where they wind up sub 500 and having to play quality basketball for 2 or 3 weeks just to get back to 500, because that's something that I would have found to be unimaginable going back to the beginning of the season. But it is very much on the table when you look at the game that they have tomorrow and then the 6 games coming up on the road with the back-to-backs, which potentially lead to more scheduled rest nights for a lot of the veterans. And what we've seen to this point, unfortunately, is those scheduled rest nights are automatic loss nights. And so if that's going to be the case, you have to make sure that you're going all in on the other nights to start stockpiling victories. Otherwise, we're going to wind up in the same position that the Warriors have been in these last 2 years, where it's basically you can play 750 ball to avoid the play-in tournament or play 750 ball to get into the play-in tournament, but you're not going to have any shot at really basically being a championship contender regardless of how good you feel about your roster when you're fully healthy heading into a potential playoff run. So let's go ahead and take a quick timeout. Again, we'll come back. We'll look ahead at what's coming up for the Warriors and what they can do to kind of mitigate some of the issues that have plagued them here over the course of the last week. It's John Dickinson. It's Just Dubs right here on the Sports Leader.
Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues. Streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
All right, final couple of minutes here. It is Just Dubs with JD John Dickinson here on the Sports Leader. We got USF Dons basketball coming up here at 11:45, so we will hand it off to Pat Olson coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But our final short segment here, Just Dubs, on this Saturday here on the Sports Leader. And again, we'll be back with you each and every Saturday for an hour after Krug. We'll get you going here with 49er forecast from 10 until 11. And then we'll be on 11 to noon. We'll expand the show when the 49er season ends. And again, we'll be all over YouTube and Twitch on mornings and afternoons where we are preempted by some other programming here. But an extension of our tremendous Dubs coverage here on the Sports Leader with an extension of our Dubs OT, which we're on after every game here on the Sports Leader, to the Saturday morning schedule as well. All right, let's look ahead here at what's coming up for the Warriors. 5-5, the 4-1 start, then 1-4 after that. Here's what's ahead. I think tomorrow for the Warriors is a must-win against Indiana. Again, Indiana's got one win, and it's against the Warriors, which, by the way, quick little nugget, not to scare any Warrior fan here, but the Indiana Pacers have never lost at Chase Center. Go figure. They're the only team in the NBA that is unbeaten at Chase Center going back to the 15-win Warrior season during COVID in 2019, 2020. And the Pacers have won each subsequent trip to the Bay since Chase Center opened in the fall of 2019. So that has been something that the Warriors have not been able to overcome, but they're going to have to overcome it, I think, tomorrow. And then you look at you got to get that one to get to 6-5. Then you go to Oklahoma City to begin the next road trip, and that's another one of these nationally televised. I think the Warriors are big game junkies, and assuming Steph is back for that one, it sounds like he's got a good shot to be back tomorrow against Indiana. But if Steph's back for the game in OKC, I think the best two efforts coming up for the Warriors of this trip are probably going to be the game at Oklahoma City. Like that is the game that they lock in for, and they beat OKC twice last year before the Jimmy Butler trade. So they had the Thunder their number a little bit last year. And so the Warriors, again, the problem for them is not being competitive in OKC or in San Antonio with Wemby and the Spurs stealing a lot of the early season headlines across the league. But it's going to be the ability to win the games like the game in Sacramento when they're shorthanded, or the game in Indiana, or the game without Giannis playing for Milwaukee. Those have been the more problematic games because the Warriors just have not been able to muster enough of the energy that they need to win those games. That is not typically a problem for the Warriors when they go up against a team like OKC. So that's a fun matchup. Then they go to San Antonio back-to-back. Do they rest guys in that one to get them ready for the rematch against San Antonio? They got the two-game baseball series for those two teams, and then they go to the Pelicans. That becomes a game that they're gonna have to get as well before playing Orlando and Miami. And Orlando and Miami could be one of those games where they have to rest. So if you're counting the two rest nights as losses, then that means you gotta try to get the other San Antonio and make sure you get Indiana and the Pelicans on these next couple of Sundays, or otherwise you might be really up against it when you come back home 2 weeks from last night. All right, that's going to do it. USF Dons basketball is coming up next here on the Sports Leader. Appreciate the help of Danny Dunn. We will be back tomorrow immediately following the Warriors and the Indiana Pacers with Dubs OT, and back next week here on Just Dubs at 11 a.m. until noon. Join me and Kyle Haar and Raph or Danny or whoever's on hand. We appreciate everyone's help. But, yeah, Don's basketball next right here on the Sports Leader.